Welcome to the Leadwell podcast, the podcast where we interview mission-driven leaders who are doing it well. We ask them what they're doing and how they're doing it so that it can help you lead your business and your people well. Are you settling? Are you feeling like you're just settling for what is instead of what could be? We all get complacent sometimes, whether it's as people or as leaders with our organizations. Today's guest, Walter Nussbaum, is going to walk us through how do we pursue excellence and do it well. Let me tell you a little bit about Walter. Walter has spent 20 years speaking and helping senior executives do just this. In addition to this, Walter is the author of 2 books, Do You Have What It Takes? And The Sync, Radical Transformation with One Small Change. From small private companies to Fortune 100, Walter has helped them walk through strategies to pursue excellence, continue to drive growth, and be productive. And he's here with us today. Stay tuned and listen to all that he has to say to us as we pursue excellence. Walter, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so glad that you are here and that we can talk about pursuing excellence as leaders and in the workplace.
John, thanks for the invitation. Honestly, anytime I get an email inviting me to talk about excellence, because so much of my life was born not from excellence, but mediocrity, I take advantage of it every single time. So thanks for the invite.
Well, you said it. I feel as though we have to go that way. And I know from my own personal experience, there's always something that happens that kind of changes my perspective, my view on things. And it sounds like you've had it too. What's going on there with most of my life in this mediocrity camp and now excellence? You got to tell me what's going on.
Well, I was probably, I want to say a typical kid, but I just was a very lazy kid. I don't know if you seem like you're a pretty conscientious guy. So have you always been a pretty
Most of the
responsible
time.
kid as a young kid? Were you pretty conscientious when you were a kid?
I may have told people that my father has been training to be a 40, 50-year-old man since I was 12, yes, but I don't know that I've always been the most responsible. I think I am a little bit responsibly mischievous at times.
Ah, okay, yeah. Well, like any kid. Well,
Yeah.
for me, I was just flat out, unfortunately, I was just flat out lazy in many ways. My
Mm.
academics showed it, my disciplines in my life showed it. All of my habits were bad. I mean, I was an athlete, and so the only area of my life really that maybe any level of excellence showed up was in athletics. But that was just because I loved it. And I talk about that a lot, by the way. At some point, I hope we can talk about the role that the heart and the affections play in shaping the human narrative. But for me, excellence wasn't something I even really thought much about. I joke because I'm about as average as they come. I graduated literally 50% of my class in high school. I'm 5'9.5". That's like about as
I'm in
average you
that
can
camp
get.
with you.
Okay. Brown hair, brown eyes. That's pretty average. Everything about my life has just been average until a moment in my life when a guy came into my life. But when I got to college, I was underperforming. I mean, I was going into my senior year with a 2.3 GPA, just struggling through school, very lazy. And if it wasn't for this guy named Greg Bott who came into my life, I probably would. I don't know where I would be, but I certainly wouldn't be enjoying the fullness of life that I'm having today.
Hmm. So what was it about that encounter that radically moved you from, I got a sense in there, like a heart for it's average is okay, to now this desire for excellence? What was it about that encounter with Greg that flipped this switch for you?
Well, he began to spend time with me. Just he was an athlete. He was a little bit older than me, and he began just to invest time in me. And I just watched him. I watched his life, his discipline, the way that he was a reader. I was not a reader. I hated reading books. I was very undisciplined with reading. I don't know how much of a reader you were growing up, but for me, I avoided it like the plague. And as I just watched his life, I remember saying to myself, I want to be like this guy. And he worked for McKinsey. Um, he was 27 years old, worked for McKinsey, drove an Audi. Everything about this guy was
Woo!
cool. He was a good looking guy, great athlete, played college basketball. And as I just kind of watched him, I just thought, I love the way this guy handles himself.
Mm.
I loved his faith. He had a real deep faith in God. He had real disciplines in his life. And I just wanted to be more like this guy. And he just began to speak into my life. And one day he said to me, about 6 months into hanging out, he said, "Hey, let's grab some lunch." And so we met at a place called Bullwinkle Steakhouse. And I
I
met him, I
just
remember
can't imagine a better steakhouse than Bullwinkle's. This sounds wonderful.
Bullwinkles. It was wonderful. So we met there 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he said before we met, he said, "Hey, bring your grade report from school." And I was like, "Why?" He said, "Just bring it. I want to see how you're doing." And somehow I found a grade report. I don't know how I found it. I found one, and I remember I handed it to him, and he earned the right to kind of say some things to me at that point. And he kind of gave me a tongue lashing about my grades. It was at that point a 2.21,
Mm.
and he did it in a loving but very honest way about just how I should be ashamed of the way that I'm treating my mind, this mind that God has given me. I should just be more, intentional about my life and what is it I want. I've got all this ability that I'm not even tapping into. Anyway, long story short, it made a difference, and he gave me a challenge. And the challenge he gave me was, he said, "I want you to start reading 10 pages a day." And he said, "That's 3,600 pages a year. That's 12 300 page books a year." And he said, "If you do that over time, you're going to begin to see some changes in your life." And I began to do that, John. And what happened was, is people began in conversations, they would talk about things, and I would start quoting from the books. And have you read this book? And all of a sudden, people began to see me as somebody that kind of had something to say. And just over time, my influence and my leadership began to grow as my leaderships began to as my disciplines began to follow suit. So really that was kind of the impetus,
Mm.
in terms of what it was that began the initial shift. But it came from me wanting to be like somebody. And
Yeah.
um, that's where it started.
So and it's simple. What he gave you was something so simple. And you said something, you said, people started to see me in this way. And I'm just
Yeah.
curious, when did you start to see yourself in that way?
Wow, that's a great question. Actually, I don't think anyone's asked me that question, John. Very good. Um, I would probably say that there was probably a lot of imposter syndrome in me. I'm reading these books, but I never really believed this is who I was. It
Hmm.
probably wouldn't be till my late 20s that I began to really see myself as a more serious person who really had something to say, who was going to make a contribution to people's lives. And eventually I made that decision that I want to spend the rest of my life investing my life into the lives of people, just like you. That,
Yeah.
to me, that is the legacy I want to leave behind. Is my life going to be a fork in the road to the people that meet me, where they have to make a decision, just like this guy Greg, that he
Right.
was a fork in the road for me. And so I strive, that was my mission statement for years, is to be a fork in the road to the people that meet me. And to this day, that's what I strive to be.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I am feeling that connection because as I'm listening to your story, I'm realizing that me and maybe others out there are like, oh, actually, no, I completely aligned with this idea of average and mediocrity, and I was not a reader, and I was also challenged to step up and to do some of these things. I had a teacher once that tell when I went to combat a grade that said, I don't know who you are. I don't think I've seen you turn anything in. Like, what
Hmm.
have you done to show me that you earn anything different than this? And very similar, right, to what it sounds like in yours, that there's a little bit of this loving truth that
Yeah.
ultimately is for your benefit, my benefit, but it's also like, excuse me while I try to swallow this extremely hard pill. And and so I'm sitting here connecting and resonating with a lot of what you are saying, and I'm thinking other people are going to as well.
Yeah.
And I, like you, had to do a lot of the actions before I believed that that's actually
Mm.
who I was.
Yeah.
And so what type of encouragement do you have for someone that's sitting there saying, either
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of it and it's not working, or yeah, no, like I'm never going to be seen that way. What would you tell them if they're kind of in the throes of that?
Well, I mean, one thing I do say, and I know you and I probably would agree with this, Aristotle once said, "In every act of doing, we are becoming." And
Mm.
that is a quote for me that has really become a life quote. If it's true that in every act of doing we are becoming, that means that in the process of creating these new disciplines and behaviors and habits over time, we will become the embodiment of those things. So if you have the patience to stay in it and make the choices you know you need to make, eventually they become reflexive. They no longer become merely disciplines, they become an overflow of who we are. And
Hmm.
the problem I had, John, to be honest with you, was, there's an interesting word in English. We get this word called mediocre in English. And mediocre comes from a Latin word, medius ocris. And medius ocris in Latin means middle of the mountain. And it was a word
Mm.
that was created to describe a certain kind of person. And it was a person who would look at the top of a mountain and say, I want to get to the peak. And when they get to the middle, they stop and they look out at the view and they say, this is good enough.
Mm.
And this is where the majority of people are, whether it's their health, whether it's their finances, whether it's their marriages, their relationships, whether it's their faith. There's an element where you just get complacent with good enough. And that was my life for so many years until this gentleman entered into my life and began to invest in my life. And then I began to really want to pursue fulfilling whatever the potential is that I have. And there's a beautiful Greek word for that too. And that Greek word is the word arete. And so, I started this thing called the Arete Way and the Arete
Uh-huh.
Center. And so I talk a lot about Arete. And Arete in Greek means excellence, but not like
Mm.
excellence that you did an excellent job. It means excellence in that you fulfilled your capacity for something. And
Wow.
that
I love how
mindset,
that is so different than what we might think of in excellence. That you said it means that excellence is that we have filled the capacity for something.
that's right. That's exactly right.
Awesome.
So, what's great about that means is no matter who we are, I'm not comparing myself to Roger Federer. I'm not comparing myself to anybody else that has fulfilled their capacity. I'm looking at it, what is my capacity at this stage of life right now? And every day, am I tapping into the capacity that I have today as a person? And hopefully, over time, that capacity continues to grow. And so I'm living the Arete way, right? Which the Arete way is pursuing excellence as a way of life. And so as your capacity grows, your outcomes grow. And so you
Mm.
can talk about excellence or arete to a 10-year-old, to a 30-year-old, to a 60-year-old, because at any stage in life, they have a potential, a capacity that they have the ability to tap into. And that was the light bulb that turned on for me.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, is what you're saying, as I fulfill that capacity, then I actually become capable of more, and thus I get to continue to strive to fill that new capacity? Is that what you're saying?
That's right. Capacity stretches into new capacities. And
Yeah.
so that's exactly right. So every time I move up into a fulfillment of some capacity, just the way we're wired, the way it works is new capacities open up to allow me to stretch myself even further. Otherwise, I become complacent at the capacity that I'm at, which becomes the new mediocre for me. Right. And
Yeah.
so this becomes a mindset, right? It's the mindset that we have to try to embed into the people around us to say, what does it look like to live up to your capacity as a husband, your capacity as a father, your capacity as a CEO or as a leader with your team? And what we find out is, tell me if this is true for you, John, what you find out is there's a lot of talented people out there who live on talent, but not on the fullness of their capacity. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. I think that they are extremely talented and they've not yet met the potential of all the full capacity that they have. And I think you took us there, so let's keep going there. I'm a leader in an organization. I'm the CEO. I'm the manager in the middle of the organization that has a team of 550, 500 underneath me that is supporting all of the work that we do. And I'm looking and I see a Walter or a John or a Susan or whomever is there and
Mm-hmm.
thinking, man, they're really good, but they're not yet even close to hitting their stride. I see so much for them. What do I do as that leader for the person, or organizationally even? What do I do to help everyone there follow the Arete way?
Yeah, well, there's three areas that I think comprise the Arete way for a leader. So I talk a lot about what's called delivery value, and it's the ability of a person to be truly skilled at the job that they're doing, so that the value that they bring every day is high to the organization. And you talk about something like this too, John. I've seen some of your videos, and you talk about this idea of competence in the workplace,
Yeah.
how important it is to be able to deliver at a high level. So that's one
Yeah.
element. But unfortunately, that's where most people stop. As long as I'm delivering at a high level on my job, they feel like that's the fulfillment of their capacity to work. But it's not. That's just one of the three. Then I need to ask myself, how effective am I in terms of my social competence with people? Competencies. How effectively am I building trust? How good of a communicator am I? How effectively am I able to inspire and motivate the people around me? How much am I reproducing myself in the lives of others where I'm
Mm.
mentoring and coaching and training other people? And then there's that one last piece, which is, I would say, the most important of the three, and that is the character development of the individual. What does courage look like in my life? Do I speak up when I should speak up? Do I challenge ideas when I should challenge ideas? Am I risk averse, or do I lean into challenges? What's my humility in life look like? Do I apologize? Do I go to people and acknowledge my mistakes? Right? There's so many areas of character. What's my self discipline look like? What does wisdom look like in my life? All of these things. So the opportunities for Arete, for excellence to develop exists in so many areas of life, that whether it's delivery value, whether it's social competencies, or whether it's character development, those
Yeah.
three areas all comprise what I call the total leader. So that's what
Yeah.
I challenge leaders to invest in their people every day, is their job skills, their social skills, and their character competencies. You do those three things, and you're going to help people begin to develop that Arete mindset.
Job skills, people skills, and character competencies. And I couldn't help it, as you were talking through them, I almost saw them as that mountain. And
Mm,
and what's going through my head is, we rise to the level of our talents, we fall to the level of our character. And yet, as I was listening to you describe it, it's almost as though character was the pinnacle, and like the base level was I can do my job. And then
beautiful.
the next level was I can do my job in a way that builds trust, relates with people, can communicate with people. And then the highest level was character. Is that how you see it? Am I missing it? Where or how would you stack these, or is it not even a mountain? Is it something that totally different?
John, I love that you probably built my next model for me, but I love the way you put that together. And you're right. Now, I've always taught that character is, of the three, the one that has the most logical importance, because if you lack the
Ditto.
character,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And I love how you actually put it in the form of a mountain. So in our next podcast together, I'm going to show the mountain with
We're doing
character
it.
development at the top,
There you
social
go.
competencies in the middle, and we start with skills, which
Mm,
are probably the easiest things to teach anyway, right?
mhm.
People always
Yeah.
talk about hard skills and soft skills. I always call them hard skills and harder skills. To me, the hard skills, right? Isn't that true?
So true.
You can teach people, hard skills. It just takes a little bit of time and training, and you'll get there. But people skills, that's tough. That's a harder skill. And
Yeah,
so
because
I
they're
always call them.
dynamic. I can systematize my job. I can't systematize people. When we do that, we run into major problems that we've all seen. So it's dynamic, and I got to
That's
be
right.
able to read all of the context clues that are going there. I love the way that you put that. Hard
I mean,
skills, harder skills.
how many people have said to you, John, that the biggest problem they have that they deal with day to day is people and culture issues?
100%.
And
Every single person,
yeah,
every single day.
every day. That's exactly right. And so learning the job, I mean, that's just learning the job. You go to
Yeah.
school, get some education, maybe get some training, have somebody, you shadow somebody. You're going to learn the job. Just give us some time. But the people side of it, man, that requires a real dedication and commitment to be versatile, to meet people where they're at, to be able to build trust, right? I've always defined trust as the degree to which you believe someone is for you. So when a
Yeah.
leader has the ability to demonstrate to everybody around them that they're for them, right, that
Yeah.
takes a lot of work and capability. And then, like you said, to get to the top of that mountain, character, right? Humility and courage and wisdom and kindness and goodness and these things. These are virtues that actually become a part of who we are, which means we have to do them long enough till they become a feature of our DNA, right? They become features of
Man.
who we are.
It goes all the way back to what you opened up with, is that you were doing a lot of these things before it was a part of your identity. And that
Yes.
seems to be the same with character, is that I have to do some of these things, kind of like you said before, where I started reading and I was doing the actions before it became my identity. When I am kind, when I am good, when I show up humble, all of a sudden it starts to become a piece of who I am. And what I do points to who I am becoming. Is that right?
That is 100% correct. That's right. We become the product of the sum of our choices, right? So when you think about, for instance, the word character, it literally means to etch. And the reason
Mm,
is because characters early on were simply symbolic. They were symbols of language. So it was alphabet. It was the alphabet. It was
hmm.
numerical. They were called characters. And over
Yeah.
time, that word evolved to take on the idea of the character of an individual, which means that just like they used to have to etch lettering into stone and wood and marble, everything we do is an etch into us. And every time you
Mm.
etch that, it becomes more of an imprint into you. And so the more you do it, the more it becomes who you are. And that's why we say somebody's character is the sum of the choices that they've made in their life. So
Wow.
you don't change your character overnight. Your character is formed by the product of choices over time that suddenly they are like a reflex. You now
Hmm.
reflex your character because it's who you are.
And I have a feeling that there is somewhere in there that idea that points towards excellence. You said early on, there's this component about the heart and the affections, and I get the sense that now that you've been striving, kind of working to reach the capacity, that full potential, that there's some of this that might also be going on in there where it's kind of etched and it just becomes a part of the ongoing process. Is there any connection there with the heart and the affections and it becoming a way of your being?
100%. That's right. In fact, the affections, are probably the strongest transformational element. The heart is the strongest transformational element that gets a person to commit themselves to long-term change. Because let me give you a great example. I love this story. I'm walking into a Starbucks one day, and as I'm walking in, there's people outside at these tables and they're smoking. And there's an elderly lady in front of me, and I open the door for her. And as we're walking in, she says to me, "I sure am glad I don't do that anymore." And I said, "You used to smoke?" And she said, "I smoked for 50 years." And I said, "Wow."
Wow.
I said, "You don't smoke anymore?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Can I ask you how you did that?" And she said, "2 years ago, I became a widow. My husband had passed away." And she said, "At my age," she said, "you don't ever expect to meet another, wonderful man in your life." And I did. She said, "About a year ago, I met this wonderful man and we began to spend some time together." And she said, after a couple months, he said to me, he said, his wife had passed away from emphysema. And he says to her, "Every time I see you smoke, it's so painful for me to watch because of what I went through with my wife before she passed." And he said, "I just don't know if I can continue to see you." And she said,
Mm.
"Do you know that was the last day I ever smoked a cigarette?"
Hmm.
And I
Wow.
said,
Not just
"You
cold turkey.
done." And I said, "You quit a 50-year habit right there?" She said, "I've never smoked a cigarette since then." And I said, "How did you do that?" And this is what she said, and it was beautiful. She said, "I guess I loved him more than I loved smoking." And the point is, what she was saying is that that's the power of an affection. That when your heart learns to love something, the behaviors and the motivations naturally flow out of it. And so when a person truly loves the idea of being a leader, like John, I'm going to assume one way you and I are a lot alike. I can tell just from our time together, you love the idea of being a leader. Is that true?
100%.
Yeah, and everything that comes with it. And so you love to read about leadership. You love to talk about leadership. You love to invest in leaders. And you don't even
Yes.
think about it. You just do it
No.
because it's the overflow of your heart. That's
Yes.
that's your affection. If you've ever worked with somebody like I have, who being a leader is not the product of their heart. They feel like it's a duty that they have to do at their job. You and I both know that they are not doing it out of love. They're doing it out of
Mm.
obligation, which means they're not investing in their people probably the way that they could or should
Yeah.
because it doesn't flow out of the heart. And so I talk a lot about this idea of affections and how do you develop these affections where now suddenly your loves that you're creating become the motivating factors of what drives you to do what you want to do.
Wow, I love
Yeah.
that. And just turn it for us here before we close. How do I how do I instill some of that very practically inside of an organization? Right. The
Mm.
immediate one for me is loving the work. Right. I can go through hiring to make sure that people are motivated and inspired by the work. I can focus on communicating the mission, vision, values, and that one was the first one. But what are some other ways that I can help people embrace excellence, kind of grow to their full potential by focusing on affections inside of the workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I talk about very quickly three things that really comprise the dynamic that creates new loves. And so everything that you and I love, everything that anyone who's watching this podcast loves in life, these three things are true about them. And you can actually create new things to love that you've never loved before if you commit yourself to these three things. And I know this is true because I today love reading. I today, there's things I love running. I used to hate running. I love running now. There's things I do today that I used to not love. In fact, I shunned them, and today I love them. And so here they are. The first thing is you have to be absolutely clear on what the value of the thing is. If you don't find value in it, the chances of you loving it is virtually zero.
Mm.
I'm married to Stacy because I realized there's value in my wife Stacy before she was my wife. And if I didn't find value in her, I would have never gotten that relationship off the ground to someday say, I love you. And I'm sure it's the same
Mhm.
with you, John, right? So there's got to
Yep.
be a real clarity of value. And this is one thing that leaders don't do well. They do not talk consistently enough about what is the value of the work, of the project, of the mission, of the vision, of what we're all about. So we have got to be value creators and value evangelists in the workplace. So let everybody know this is why what you're doing is so important. Secondly, you've got to have somebody, either an individual or a group of people that you look up to, that are people that you want to aspire to be more like. This is Greg Bott for me. So when I looked at Greg Bott, here's a guy that I valued who he was. I saw value in his life and I wanted more of what he had. And he loved me and he spent time with me and he invested in me. And it made me want to spend more time with him. As I did that, it got into me. And then what he did is he began to make me do number three, which was to now practice the thing, begin reading 10 pages a day, begin getting up earlier in the morning, doing my workouts in the morning and not waiting till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But do your workouts at 7 a.m. so that you are controlling your body and you're not letting your body control you. That's what he used to tell me all the time. Do your
Mhm.
workouts in the morning, Walter. It's going to make you learn to have your mind over your body. So, same thing in the workplace. We need to create mentors. We need to create um, uh, these programs where people are shadowing people that they admire and aspire to be more like. And if you can do those three things over time, that thing will become an affection for you because you value it, because you've got somebody you admire and you look up to
Mhm.
that models it, and because you've been doing it now, you've been doing the thing, and over time it becomes part of who you are.
Wow. I I'm sitting here thinking for all the leaders that you, Walter, and I probably engage with, and sometimes there's a culture of complacency, and it's hard to talk about excellence. It's hard to step into that difficult conversation where we're saying something like, you need to be reading 10 pages a day, or this isn't the capacity that I see for you. What do you see for yourself? That can be really hard. And yet I hope what all of you just got from Walter is, one, we need it, because left to our own devices, we might settle for mediocre and think that middle of the mountain view is great.
Mm,
Two, that it really is for their best interest. And when you come at it with a heart of earning that relationship and leaning in, it's going to be something that can be good for everybody involved. And he's got some framework. So go back and listen, jot them down as I have, draw the little mountain and where all these things go. And Walter, this has been so great, but I would be remiss if before leaving, I asked you the question we ask everybody, which is, Walter, what does it mean to you to lead well?
mm. I would say to lead well would be number one, to lead myself well, that I've got to be an integrated person, that who I'm trying to get other people to be, I'm striving to be myself. So it's got to start with me. You can't fake it, right? Eventually it gets found out. So I've got to be the person that I'm describing to others that they should strive to become like. And then I would say that leading others well is about reproducing a part of you in them. That leading others is taking your DNA and imposing that DNA onto others so that they begin to have the same loves and desires and influences that influenced you. So I think leadership, ultimately, leading well, is about influence. It's about influencing yourself and influencing the people around you.
You have to lead yourself well before you can lead others well, before you can replicate the things that you want to see.
Wow,
That is
beautiful.
awesome, Walter. Thank you so much. Where can people connect with you? I follow you on Instagram. I know
Okay.
there's a website. Point us in the direction where people can connect with you.
LinkedIn, obviously, if they want to connect business wise, it's Walter Nussbaum. There's only one in the entire country, thankfully, so I'm easy to find. Walter Nussbaum.
Perfect.
Yep. So that's probably the best way on business. In terms of Instagram, it's actually the Arete way. It's not even my name. It's Arete, the Arete way. It's a great little fun channel. I do little short videos. And yeah, connect with me on there, and I'd love to help however I can.
Awesome. And we will make sure those links are in the show notes so that anybody can download those. And as I said, this is one, go back, re-listen to the episode, take the things in there, take the encouragement, take the challenge that
Mm.
Walter also put out there so that you can continue to lead well wherever you are and pursue excellence because the work that you do matters. My friends, thank you for being with us today. Be well, God bless, and lead on.